Hello, this is 𝗲𝗲𝗹𝗶 and you're watching the Shift Asia In-Depth with CelcomDigi. Recognizing the interconnectedness of digital connectivity and societal well-being, CelcomDigi is embarking on a journey to redefine its role in the global landscape with its thrust of advancing inspiring society, supported by 4 pillars, namely inclusive and safe digital access, sustainable value chain, governance and performance culture, and environmental impact and action. We covered inclusive and safe digital access last week, and now we're talking about sustainable value chain. We have Ling, once again, Head of Sustainability at CelcomDigi, to dissect this for us. So sustainable value chain is about managing an extensive supply chain, and CelcomDigi aims to raise standards across its value chain, uplifting hundreds of Malaysian businesses through capacity building while mitigating human rights and health and safety risks. Now, CelcomDigi has an extensive supply chain, right? And what does that encompass? The obvious and the not so obvious.
Yep. So like any large corporates in Malaysia, you have extensive supply chain and it's often layered, right? Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. So we recognize that there are human rights risks across the supply chain, right? And what we do is that we need to be able to understand those risks as well as address and manage them, right? So in a sense, what is obvious is that you need to have policies in place, right? So for us, we have business partner management policies, we have human rights due diligence. So as you have policies in place, of course, then you need to get your employees to understand what is the requirement, right? I think sometimes even the word human rights, the definition is not clear with a lot of people. Right? When you go to any suppliers and say, hey, I need you to, that's a human rights requirement to work with us.
Yes.
No, most people are like, I don't
understand. What is my right and your right is very different,
exactly,
right? Okay.
So it's important to break it down. That's where, again, there's a lot of guiding principles. We follow the UN guiding principle of business and human rights, right? And of course, ILO and various ones. So by having a lot of these standards, especially because we are in the mobile sector, the GSMA has also a sector-specific human rights guidance for us, right? So by looking at those, then it's important then to align with your suppliers. Whether they are in the same industry or different industry, what does human rights look like for them, right? And as you work with us, probably back to the question, what is not so obvious is what are the things that we need you to put in place for your own employees, for their safety, for their needs, if there's any forced labor, child labor, modern day slavery, you know. So as we go down that checklist with different suppliers, then you are able to identify where are some of the higher risks that you need to mitigate.
Okay, all right. And last year you spent over 20,000 hours training suppliers, right? What training did you do, and what sort of kind of training?
Yes, so we do conduct a lot of trainings, and it usually also falls within the ESG pillar. So there is a lot of health and safety training, especially if you are working on our sites. You know? And it's also important that the type of employees that you employ, you know, whether are they foreign workers, are they local workers, right? So there's also training around environmental requirements, you know, as you dig, as you build and all those, what are the environmental requirements there? There's also training on data privacy if you're an IT supplier, software supplier, you know. Back to our conversation earlier on data privacy and governance, right? They are training on anti-corruption, code of conduct, also conflict of interest in doing business with us. So it's a whole list of training. Again, it's also in the sense mirrored. Whatever our employees are being trained, we also expect our suppliers or vendors or business partners to be trained, right? And so even as we do that training, we also tell them that, example, we will come for unannounced inspections, right?
Spot check.
Spot check. So one of the things we have is something we call CelcomDigi permit to work. So before you can go to one of our towers, you have to submit a permit to work. Now, these are the 5 workers going today. You have to take a photo of them in their full regalia, right? With harness and safety and helmets. And then when we do unannounced inspections, we compare what you have submitted in the photo with your IT documents.
So it's not an old photo.
Yes, is it the same person? Is he wearing the same clothes today? You know, why is your photo different from the person who's climbing the tower, right? And now again with technology, you have CCTVs. So it's also a way for you to constantly monitor some of these reasons.
And so what else is planned for 2024? Because 20,000 last year, what's this year?
So for 2024, I think one of the important things that we want to do is to uplift a lot of these requirements for our suppliers.
Okay.
So recently, again, there is a new occupational safety and health regulations coming up, right? So a lot of our suppliers, even the smaller suppliers, SMEs and all those, find it a bit overwhelming. How do I build resource, put resource into this? How do I train my people? But one thing we're glad to see that a lot of suppliers who have been with us in the journey realize that, hey, this is not something new that the government is putting in. This was something that CelcomDigi has told us that to be expect that it will be coming. And real enough, it's actually now here. So in a sense, we welcome that. But there's also a lot of collaboration, dialogues that needs to happen in place with our suppliers to bring them up to speed, to bring them up to the level. Because it's one thing to have a policy and a law, but it's one thing to have good business practices.
Right.
To be able to implement what is on paper and to monitor it effectively.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, in the area of occupational safety and health, ISO 45001 recertification for all CelcomDigi premises by this year is being looked into. So for those of you who don't know, I also had to do a bit of research. ISO 45001 is the reduction of occupational injuries and diseases, including promoting and protecting physical and mental health. So how many premises are we talking about? And when you talk about mental health, what does all entail?
So for us, we've got 110 premises, mix of data centers, retail offices, workplaces. So it's important to ensure the health and safety in that sense, and to even try to sometimes go beyond it, right?
Right.
So example, we used to have parking lots allocated for pregnant colleagues, right? And I think it was a nice touch that as you move towards labor, we move you nearer to the door.
Okay.
Right? Then of course, once
First trimester, second trimester.
then you're out. So I think sometimes it's the little things that matter when
Right.
it comes to health and safety, right? Especially when it comes to mental health awareness. It's a silent killer sometimes.
Yeah.
How stress are taking over. So we have trained mental health aiders who are just colleagues, but who are trained to actually encourage you,
Okay.
to sometimes just give you that shoulder to cry on,
Right.
to help you distress. So we realize that a lot of these are actually things that employees actually look for.
Right.
And we are proud also that I can be beyond just my normal routine 9 to 5 job. I actually have another training that
Right.
upskills me with my colleague relationships. Right, so we are trying to look at it. It's ISO 45003 to also bring up more of this mental health.
Okay.
Then, of course, we have first aiders. There's also another group who likes to physically help people who are injured. So again, putting these ecosystems in place and having different groups doing different things builds a stronger community as a whole.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. What do you foresee as the key challenges and opportunities for sustainable value chains within the telco industry in the coming years, especially in the context of advancing technologies and evolving consumer expectations?
So in terms of challenges, we do see a few challenges. One, of course, e-waste. As more and more things are digitalized, there are more electronics being used.
Right.
So again, there are e-waste regulations that we adhere to. But what is the best way to collect and reuse a lot of this e-waste? So that's one challenge that we see. Supply chain, again, the layers are getting deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
There are more imports and exports. So how far down the supply chain do you monitor? And how do you do that? And sometimes that's where industry comes into play. Because many a times with your peers and even your competitors, you're using the same group of suppliers. If everyone raises the bar together, then you see the whole supply chain raising. Right. So those are initiatives that needs to put in place. Energy consumption, again, we are, as consumers, we are demanding more and more data consumption 24/7. So how do you decouple rising data demand with energy consumption? Right. Again, this is going back to net zero, science-based targets. How do you decouple it and how do you put in initiatives to slow down the growth of energy in a sustainable way? And I guess for some opportunities, if I can just share about that, I think circular economy, that's a huge opportunity there, but it needs a lot of thinking through. It needs a lot of partnerships in order to build that circular economy. And how do you source sustainability from our for suppliers? All the suppliers working with us have to go through an integrity due diligence.
Okay.
Right? And in the process, they start learning what are considered high standards, what are considered moderate standards, and what are standards that is not accepted by a lot of companies in Malaysia.
Right, and you really have to spell it out, right? So I mean, something very interesting you said about partnerships, and there's something that we can aspire to do, but it is industry wide that will help raise the bar for everyone. Thanks for sharing, and of course, next week we'll cover another pillar around what CelcomDigi is doing, and you've been watching the Shift Asia in depth with CelcomDigi.